Hello everybody, today we're going to get an update on the voter registration data for the month of April. Now, as always, this is not my own data, this is from Michael Pruser associated with Decision Desk, so we're going to trust that he's got the right numbers. And some states update their data more often than others, and some clean up their voter rolls a little bit differently, and other states have automatic voter registration, etc. So these numbers are not everything. They don't necessarily determine how somebody is going to vote, but I wouldn't totally dismiss these numbers either. Now, we've got more than 20 states to get through, so we're going to go quickly. Now this first one is from March. It didn't make my last video, but it's a huge state. It's California. Their data does not come out often at all, so we've got to take a look at it. So in the top right, we could see the margin for Harris in 24 was 20.14%. Now the changes in party registration from their last update in November is the Republicans went up massively here, over 138,000. The Dems about 12K. Other or independent is also up more than the Republicans, 154,850. So this is a pretty blue state, but the Republicans made gains in the 2024 election, and these numbers here certainly reflect that. Now the overall active party registration in the state, it's over 5.7 million for the Republicans and 10.3 million for the Dems. Other is at 6.7 million. That's a total advantage for the Democrats of just under 4.6 million. Now for comparison, back in November of 24, the Dems were up a little bit more than that, 4.7 million. In November of 22, they were over 5 million. And in November of 2020, it was over 4.8 million. So this kind of reflects what we saw in November. But I would recommend waiting one or two more cycles before we actually see if these numbers are going to have more impact. But just based on these numbers, they're undoubtedly great for the GOP. Now we can go a little quicker through the rest of these states. Next up, let's take a look at New Jersey. Harris won the state by under 6 points. That was shocking. The changes from March are the Republicans up 5,200, Dems up just 700 here, Other is up 3,300. But the overall advantage for the Dems here is 829,000. That is a lot, but it's down from 905,000 in the last election. In 2020, it was 1,079,000. So Republicans have their hopes up here that this state could become more competitive in the future. Dems dismiss it. They think the state is too blue. Got a key governor's race this year in New Jersey. We'll see what happens. Next, we've got a purple state. It's Nevada. Trump won it by 3.1. Since March here, the Republicans lost 1,300. Dems, 1,100. Other is up almost 11,000. Now, if you look at the active party registration, it's almost dead even, but Other clearly outnumbers the two major parties. But up here, the Dems technically have a 2 advantage in terms of party registration. You're not going to get any more even than that. If you look back on election day, the Dems were up over 7,100. In 2020, they were up 86,000. So this purple state does look like it's gotten a little bit redder over the past few years. Still very competitive though. Next state, Colorado. Harris won it by about 11%. Since March, the Republicans went down 646. The Dems went down 1661. Other is up huge, 12,800. So the Dems lost 1,000 more. But it is a bluer state. They do stand to be able to lose a little bit more. It's another state where Other clearly outnumbers the two major parties on active registration. But overall, the Dems are up just under 100,000 here. It's a little bit lower than 110,000 in November of 24. And it's very similar to where it was at in November of 2020. Next, in Iowa, Trump won it by 13.2. Not really a competitive state. The changes here since March are the Republicans went down almost 33,000 and the Dems almost 30,000. Other went down even more than both of them at about 64,500. Similar to Colorado, there's more Republicans here, so they do stand to lose some more voters when the voter rolls are cleaned up. The GOP advantage here is 188,000. That's up from November of 24 where it was at 173,000. And that's up big from November of 2020, where it was at 20,590. Next, we've got Maryland, and we've got Harris winning it by a huge 28.5%. Since March, Republicans actually gained here about 1,200. Dems went down about the same amount. But again, Other is up way more than either of the two parties. The Dems have an advantage here of just under 1.2 million. That's just barely lower than Election Day 24, and it's a little bit lower than Election Day 2020. Next state, it's a super red one. It's Kentucky. Trump here at 30.5. Since last month, Republicans up just 157 here, but the Dems dropped off 3248. This state, like several others on here, are prone to have a lot of legacy Democrats. They may be technically registered as Democrats, but they may have been voting Republican for a long time. The GOP advantage here is 187,000, and this is a state where there's not that many third-party voters, just 358,000 overall. The GOP advantage here is 187,000. That's higher than the 150,000 in 24. Back in 2020, it was actually Dems that had the advantage of 104,000. Been a red state for a long time, but the voter registration only recently caught up. Next state, it's another extremely red one. It's West Virginia. Trump here at 41.9. Republican advantage 158,000. That's up from the 144,000 in 24. And in 2020, again, Dems had the advantage here of 8,500. It's another state where the party registration data does not necessarily reflect the election results. Next, how about another super important state? It's Pennsylvania. Trump carried it by 1.7. The Republicans went up about 1,500 here, while the Dems dropped off 5,700. The Dems do have an advantage in this state of over 92,000. That is a ton lower than it was in 24, where it was at 286,000. And that's also way lower than it was in 2020, where they were up 685K. So it could again be a lot of ancestral Democrats, but there's also no denying that there's been consistent, significant movement toward the Republicans in terms of registration. Next, let's go to Florida, the former swing state. Trump here at 13.1. Since last month, they've cleaned up their voter rolls. Republicans down to 7,800. Dems about 3 times that, 23,900. The Republican advantage now is at 1.2 million here. That's higher than under 1.1 million in 24. Back in 2020, the Dems again had the advantage at 134,000. So this is even more significant movement than Pennsylvania. And that also reflects how this is no longer considered to be a swing state by most people. Next state, it's Rhode Island. Harris here won it by 13.8. Since March, not a lot of changes here. Republicans down at just 14. Dems way more than that at 982. It's another state where other has way more than both of the parties. But the Dems do have a significant advantage here of 163,000. It's a little bit lower than in 24, where it was at 169,000. And it's also lower than in November of 2020, where they were up at 222K. Next, New Mexico. Harris won the state by an even 6. The changes after cleaning up the voter rolls from last month. Republicans went down over 16K. Dems 21K. The Dems have an advantage here of 136,000. That is lower than in 24, where they were up 154,900. And that continues the downward trend from 2020, where they were up 185,000. So all those numbers added up make this for an exciting state to watch in the future. Next, we're going to go back to a red state. It's Nebraska, and Trump won it by about 20.5%. Not a lot of changes here. Republicans went down 92. Dems down 348. And these numbers are total party registration, not active party. But the GOP has a significant advantage here of 292,000. So a little bit higher than 286K in 24. And in 2020, it was at 236,000. An even redder state is Oklahoma. Trump won it by 34.3. Republicans gained 1,700. Dems dropped off almost 1,000. GOP advantage here, 645,000. That's higher than in 24, where it was at 606. And in 2020, it was an advantage of 389,000. So these numbers again keep going up for the Republicans. In Idaho, Trump won it by 36.5. Republicans dropped off 932. Dems went down 377. Republican advantage 507,000. That's higher than in 24, where it was at 496K, and it was 390K back in November of 2020. In Alaska, Trump won it by 13.1. Republicans went down 4,400. Dems down 2,800. This is another state that has a lot of independent or third-party voters, but the Republicans are up 72,900. That's just a little bit higher than in November of 24, where they were at about 72,000. Back in 2020, they also had an advantage of about 67,000. In Delaware, Harris won the state by 14.7. Republicans down 51. Dems also down way more at 481. The Dems have an advantage here of 142,700. That's a little bit lower than the advantage they had in 24, where it was at 145,000. And in 2020, their advantage was 147,000. In Kansas, Trump won the state by 16. Republicans went down 164. Dems went down at 735. Other other is up over 2,200. Republican advantage 402,000. That's higher than in 24 where they were up 391,000. In 2020, they also had an advantage of 360,000. So yet again, most of these states keep seeing a gain for the Republicans and a loss for the Democrats. Let's keep going. We've got Louisiana. Trump won it by 22. Republicans went down 776. Dems dropped off 1835. In this state, the Democrats have an advantage of 50,421. But that number keeps getting lower and lower. Back in 24, they had an advantage of 86,000. In 2020, the advantage was way higher at 249,000. It's another red state with legacy Democrats. At some point, that party registration advantage is going to flip. How about another battleground state? We've got North Carolina. Trump won it by 3.2. Republicans went down big here, 18,300, but the Dems went down even bigger, about 46,000. Other also went down 36,600. So a lot of cleanup there. But the Republicans have an advantage of 80,254. And you'll notice that is actually flipped from 2024, where the Dems had the advantage of 105,000. And back in 2020, they had a much more significant advantage of 391,000. So again, a ton of movement here away from the Dems in terms of party registration. And Republicans take an advantage in another southern state. How about South Dakota? Trump won it by 29.2. It's not a population heavy state, but the Republicans went up 523. The Dems went down 153. GOP advantage here 175,000. That is higher than 170,000 back in 24. In 2020, the advantage was 118,900 for the GOP. In Utah, Trump won it by 21.6. Republicans went up 1,100. Dems 472. Republican advantage 692K. It's a little higher than in 24, where it was at 689. In 2020, the Republicans were up 620,000. And we've got one more state here. It's Wyoming. Trump won it huge, 45.8. And there's been little change here since March. Republicans went down 146. Dems just 42. And other is up 44. Republican advantage 180,600. Now that is actually lower than in 24, where they had an advantage of 193,000. But it's up from 2020, where they were up 138,000. So Wyoming, like some of the other deep red or deep blue states, when the voter rolls are cleaned up, there's going to be more voters lost from that dominant political party. Now there could also be movement in these states, and it's not all just voter roll cleanup, but you've got to go case by case. So you could be the judge on if Wyoming actually got a little bit bluer from 24. But that's it. Those are all of the states. There's a whole lot of data there, and whenever I do this video every month, it's pretty clear that across the vast majority of states, the movement is away from the Dems and toward the Republicans. Now, given that it's almost every state, almost every time, that has to count for something. But I always caution people that voter registration data is not actually election results. It doesn't tell you who's going to turn out, and it doesn't tell you how they're going to vote. But there's no question that the Democrats would love to be in the Republicans' position when they're taking a look at this voter registration data. At some point, I would expect the Dems to actually gain in some of these states, but who knows when it's going to be and by how much. But for now, that's it for the month of April. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about any of the data in any of these states? Which state surprised you the most, and which do you wish was included in this batch of states? And what do you think about the overall trends getting redder? How much do you think that matters for the upcoming elections? Let me know down below. On your way out, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.